Hello and welcome to another Tech Talk Thursday. My name is Ray, and in today's video tutorial, we're going to be taking a look at dynamic mapping using a copy activity within Azure Synapse Analytics. This use case is going to be for those of you who need to bring over your data from source to destination while needing to only bring over a subset of that data. The way that we are going to implement dynamic mapping is going to scope our source to just the fields that are required for us to bring over. This is also going to be good for those of you who may have experienced corrupt file types or file types that are not supported with the encoding that might cause a little bit of problems when mapping the data from source to destination in, let's say, a Parquet format. So we're going to jump right in. On my screen, I have a Azure Data Lake. We're going to go into the demo file, and in demo, I have a file called names.csv. If we take a look at it, you're going to see that this is just a very basic file. It just has first name, last name, and age. And the requirements that we're going to go with in this particular use case are, I only want to bring in the first name and the last name. And I also want to ensure that my pipeline that gets created is still able to handle the metadata-driven approach. Just because I set a schema in place, I don't want my pipeline to be restricted to only that schema. So we're going to use dynamic mapping in order to achieve that requirement. So I'm going to head over to Synapse Studio, and we're going to bring over we're going to create a new pipeline, and we're going to use the copy activity. So under source, we're going to create a brand new data set. And this is again using Data Lake Storage Gen 2. This is a CSV file, so we're going to select the delimited text format. We're going to select our linked service, and we are going to navigate to where that file lives. It's under demo, and under the CSV, or it is named name.csv. And I'm going to select this first row as header because this file did have the first row with the header information. And now we're going to configure our destination, our sink. So again, we're going to create a brand new data set. Again, Azure Data Lake Storage. Only this time I want to put this in Parquet format as we land it into our raw container. We'll use the same linked service, and we will navigate to raw, and we'll put it in the root directory of the employee or of the raw container. We'll click OK. So the next thing that we're going to want to do is specify the mapping. We're not going to leave it after we import the schema. We're not going to leave this mapping, but the idea here is to extract what is generated throughout the code. So as I mentioned early on, the requirement in this case is to only bring in the first name, last name, which means let's remove this age. So if I go ahead and delete that, now the JSON behind the scenes will have this mapping in place. The way that we extract that is right here on the top right corner, there is a JSON code representation icon. And if I click that, we will see that there's a bunch of JSON here, but the thing that we're most interested in is this translator. And basically, starting from the translator, this open curly brace, this tabular translator is going to contain our mapping. So you can see we have our first name, we have our last name, then we have a couple of other properties that we're going to want to take as well. So we're going to want the type conversion all the way up until treat Boolean as num. So I'm going to copy that. And it's probably going to be a good idea to validate the JSON that you've selected, just to ensure that it is going to work. So I just Google searched a very basic JSON validator, and this is where I'm going to paste in that JSON, validate the JSON, and you can see that I have an error. What it's probably indicating is I have one too many curly braces, so I'm going to remove one, validate the JSON, and you can see that it's validated. This is a good indication that this is a value that will work as we pass it in. So I'm going to close out of that. And now the next step that we need to do is we need to store this value somewhere. Right? This could be a control table. It could be a default and parameter value. Recommendation would be a control table, but for our use case, we will just put it into a variable or into a parameter, excuse me. And we're going to go ahead and paste in that value there. Once we have that value stored into our parameter list, the next thing we need to do is clear out the mapping that we used in order to extract those values. And if you hover over the import schema, you're going to see that there is a link here called Add Dynamic Content. We're going to click that, and this is where we're going to add our parameter. In order for this to work, we need to do a couple things. We are going to need to cast this as type string, or I think we can even use string interpolation. And then we need to ensure that this takes the JSON format, so we can do that by adding the JSON function around our string. And that's it. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And with that, we have now successfully created a pipeline that uses dynamic mapping and is still metadata driven, because we don't rely solely on this schema to be in place in order for this pipeline to work. Any schema can work, but we are just specifying that for this particular file, we want it to use this schema. And I'm going to go ahead and click debug, click OK, and then we're going to view the data after this runs. So I will navigate back over to my data lake. And we will go to the raw folder. And there you can see is my names.parquet file. And if I select from here and do a run, the expectation is that we only see that the first name and last name did come through, and that is exactly what we see. I want to thank you so much for joining today's session. I hope you learned of something of value today, and we're going to see you in the next one.